going to talk to you for a few minutes about how we're going to order the show. In about 5 minutes, we're going to go to our standing by. That just lets people get their notifications and get ready. That music plays for about
You
three
don't mind that I
minutes.
stream this, right? This part.
Oh, go for it. If you
Okay,
thank you
because
for
I've
letting me
been
know. I
live
appreciate
before
that.
I joined.
I see. I do appreciate you letting me know. On occasion, people don't let us know, and we usually assume that we're down on the back, and there are times when we have to discuss things that we can't discuss on stream. This is not one of those times, but I appreciate
Okay.
you letting me know. So then we're going to intro. We've got a cold open with Penn Jillette, and then no, sorry, it's standing by, cold open with Penn Jillette, intro, and then we're going to go. I'm going to talk briefly about what's happened with Trump in regards to Ukraine over the last week in relation to his sort of initial stance.
Yeah.
It's obviously changed a lot. So I'm just going to give the audience a basic primer, and then I'm going to start asking you some questions. The questions are going to be pertaining to is this important? Why do we care about Ukraine? And should the U.S. Be involved? What happens if they don't get involved? Does EU have the capacity to make up the difference? Are they interested in making up the difference? Should Zelensky just cut and run? I'm going to ask you questions to which, by the way, usually it's rare I ask a question to which I don't already know the answer. Sometimes I get surprised, but we're a pro-Ukrainian channel, but we want to ask these questions so people understand the answers to them. So I know Zelensky has most sources that I'm seeing say that Zelensky is very upset that Trump had his call with Putin. However, Zelensky.
No wonder, especially considering its content.
Yes, which I'd like to very much discuss. Zelensky has just come out and did a press briefing a short while ago and said, hey, we expected them to talk. Trump wants to mediate this. The one thing he needs to understand, which apparently he doesn't, is you can't negotiate a truce between two parties when one of them isn't invited to negotiation.
And I guess we'll discuss it when we discuss it, but new things came up regarding that as well.
Yep.
Right now.
So that's it. And the goal is, this is an educational program. The goal is to be sort of as informative to our audience as possible. My co-host here is Azandering.
Right.
And
Oh, is that the pause that you wanted me to say something like hello?
That's what I was thinking, but
okay. Sorry.
I figured it was subtle, so I figured obviously you'd miss it.
Yeah, subtlety's wasted on conservatives.
Oh my goodness.
So is nuance.
Unfortunately, it is the world that we live in now. So
well, Andrew is a conservative, but
just like, yes, who isn't? Sorry,
who isn't?
Who isn't a conservative?
Oh no, Azandering is a conservative, so he gets to tell conservative jokes. I get to tell them, but I have to remember that he's got 5 firearms in his truck at all times, and he knows where I live. So.
Oh, well, unfortunately. There's been a new development in healthcare as well. United States.
Yeah.
A new confirmation.
All right. The Radio Free Europe, which is I know it's a small thing. It sounds like a small thing. It's not a small thing.
Also, a second thing has been alongside the Radio Free Europe is to be asked.
Right. Normally, we shoot for an hour. I don't think that's possible in this case. I think in order to have a good discussion, we're probably going to go at least 90 minutes. Usually my goal is to go as long that we feel we've covered everything, but I don't like to linger. I don't like to just let the audience get bored. So we're going to keep moving forward, but we're going to make sure we hit all the points. Do you have any questions before I start?
No, I think we're okay. We're going to talk about Radio Free Europe as well.
I'd like to bring that up. So if there's anything you want to talk about,
I guess close to home, since both my parents were in the opposition against the regime in Poland before 1989.
Oh.
So they were pretty into that sort of stuff, including listening and even cooperating with the radio.
Well, I do understand Trump's fascination with shutting down anything that opposes fascism. So I do understand his position. All right, so let me get this ready, and if I could stop hitting the wrong buttons, as don't say anything.
Oh,
don't say anything.
That I'm pretty quiet. How do I make myself?
You don't need to. I will. If you want to mute yourself, you should be able to on the board. Nobody will be able to hear you until after the introduction is done, and I will let you know.
My chat
Usually,
told me that I'm quiet.
oh, I don't know how you can help that for your chat. You're coming into our stream perfectly, and our audience will be able to hear you.
Volume as well. Maybe I'll just be closer to the microphone. Whoop.
We also level and boost our audience so that everybody usually is roughly at the same level. I've knocked Xandring's mic down by about 20%. Nobody's noticed that yet.
Okay. I do see.
I'm not getting anything from him today.
Whoop,
All right, let me.
Better, maybe.
Okay, you can continue to test that. I will let you know before your
Okay.
mic goes hot, but you can keep talking.
All right.
It's not going to be a problem.
How is it now? How is it now? Lucy, volume low. That cannot be.
Oh, hold on. Let me turn the internals down. So there you go.
Ah, yes.
All right. Oh, I should maybe check our live chat. That would be a wise thing to do. Ta-da. No, you and I actually. You and I spoke briefly on Sunday's Discord, and I think I was on with you on Sunday through the Discord, but this was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was a while ago. We've been down for a little while, so you know. And remember, it was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember. I think it may have been. It was right after his Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
He would solve the Ukraine-Russia war within his first 24 hours in office.
There was also a position before that position.
What was the position? What was
the
that
position
one?
before that position was, first of all, that there was no war when he was in office, which is a blatant lie. And the second was that no full-scale invasion would have ever happened if he was the president, which is something that, in my opinion, he just cannot say with such blatant certainty. So I guess those are the positions before the position.
That is true. The argument that his supporters like to use is he's so crazy, nobody would start a war because he might nuke them. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know what's worse. I don't actually believe that's true. But if it is true, that's really that kind of crazy you don't want to elect.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there was a conflict in the Donbass, right? Raging when Trump was in office. And he did nothing about it because he just didn't care. But
and he attacked the Assad regime. So he engaged, and he's sitting there going like, we didn't do any military. Ask Assad whether or not you did. Now, granted, Assad deserved it. He had used chemical weapons, but
yes.
The question isn't were the attacks deserved. The question was there any fighting during your presidency? And the answer is yes, there was.
Yeah, he should have been gone a long time ago, but I guess we're not discussing Assad today.
Yeah, no. Obama, one of my faves, but yes, that was a failure. But so now Trump has eventually Trump admitted this was going to take a while, and he sort of telegraphed after thinking about it that, well, as long as Ukraine would be willing to give us their precious minerals, we would, of course, keep supplying them.
Yeah.
Then it got in the water supply that maybe would even fight on their side. And now he's had a call with Russia today. The reports are that everybody in Europe, that Ukraine, Zelensky himself is very upset about this call, but Zelensky has gone on air. Zelensky's gone on air and said, nothing to worry about. We knew that at some point he's going to have to call Putin. Obviously, he's going to have to do that. And he may seem to think that he and Putin are going to negotiate a settlement. There is no deal without Ukraine. Obviously, you can't have a peace deal without both parties agreeing.
I mean, Trump has a record of brokering deals without a party being present. So,
he does. So why is Europe so upset about this call?
Well, it's upset because it gave too much concessions to Vladimir Putin, basically, and it excluded, again, Zelensky from that conversation.
What were the...
Well, there was a mixture of strange misinformation. First of all, historical misinformation, talking about how in World War II, tens of millions of Russians died, and likewise we have lost so much, when in reality it was the USSR, and the main brunt of the people that died were actually Ukrainian people and Belarusian people. That a lot of people in the Red Army who fought against the Nazis were Ukrainian themselves. So this whole framing of the situation of, oh, we and Russia are just great buddies. We fought in the war together, so we should be more friendly. We should go back to business as usual sooner or later, which is actually in the description of the call by Trump himself, that we should be going to doing great business together. That was in a separate statement, I believe. That statement that returning to the pre uh, 2014 borders is unrealistic, but it's certainly tied to the thing. Hold on, I'm actually gonna bring up that tweet and look.
Well, Hegseth, I know, said that. Just to
Yes.
remind our audience, when World War II started, the USSR had a pact. What country was that pact with?
Germany, Nazi Germany.
Germany. So they were actually essentially a part of the Axis powers. Why on
Well,
earth
technically
did they switch sides?
Technically speaking, not really a part of the Axis powers. They wanted to join, but it didn't pan out, as you know, right before Barbarossa. But basically they were allies. They swapped resources.
Well, and they were going to split Poland.
Yes, a little known fact is that they've written an additional little add-on to the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact called the Pact of Friendship and Borders, which the name itself should tell us a bit. And it basically stated among trading stuff that if on any side some sort of insurrection will start blossoming against the other, they will immediately squash it. So
all right, so Russia during World War II, at least at the start of it, Russia and Germany was buddy-buddy.
Yeah, well, the USSR, but
what
Russia
changed?
was.
Oh yeah, sorry, thank you, the USSR. What changed?
Well, Hitler invaded the USSR in Operation Barbarossa, which I guess you could say that the whole Ribbentrop-Molotov part is part of the, not officially, but you could very well make a statement, make a case that it was part of the Operation Fallweis.
So it seems like the statement that we were friends with Russia, the only reason Russia became friends with us is because Germany was invading, and if they didn't, they were going to get wiped out. They had no choice by this point. Germany was attacking them and betrayed them.
Yes.
They had intended to be on the German side.
Yes, to the point where Stalin actually did not believe that was happening as it was happening at the beginning. He thought that was a political stunt. There was a way to pressure the USSR for some sort of concessions. He even forbade, which is a very bizarre way as to how the Red Army was structured, because the ammunition, the live ammunition, was always held separate from the soldiers, so they couldn't use it to, I don't know, uproot the regime. The planes were always were never really fueled and ready to go. They had to receive permission to take the fuel and to fuel the planes in order to lift them to the air. And they did not receive permission to use the live ammunition because Stalin did not believe what was happening. The planes did not receive permission to be fueled, and that just resulted in about 2,000 USSR planes being lost within the first 48 hours of the invasion.
So it seems that Trump is ignorant of this history, either doesn't care or
no, I don't think
doesn't
he knows
understand
the history of his own country, not to mention others.
Well, it's kind of hard to remember history. He may be still suffering the blow of Canada burning down the White House. At any rate,
I mean, he is suffering from that, considering his plans for Canada. But
he is. He's tweeted about it, and he's clearly upset enough that he's going to tariff Canada back to the Stone Age. But
and
at
back
any
to
rate,
the United States as a state, as a glorious state.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, and then red, white, and blueland is going to be the next. Yeah.
Greenland, Panama Canal. And of course, let us not forget the Pearl of the East, Gaza.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I did forget that Gaza, the new
Yeah, the
Morocco, and
Pearl
the
of the
new.
East.
I will say this. I am starting to believe in the Bible, if for no other reason than I believe Trump has to be the opening of one of the seven seas. I mean, he is a plague.
Well,
He is a plague on the country.
to believe in Star Wars, the prequels specifically.
Yes, this is how democracy. Zandering has said that on more than
Trump's
one
gonna
occasion.
what sooner or later. Oh wait, that already happened actually. Like there was this assassination attempt. The attack on my life has left me
Yes.
scarred and deformed. But let me assure you,
God.
that's
Yeah.
why.
Oh, now you're scaring me.
Yeah.
Oh
We
my
shall
God.
reform the United States into a new intercontinental empire for the safety and stability of society. That's gonna happen.
MAGA.
See?
Yeah. No. Oh. I'm aware. Believe me, I'm aware.
But don't worry.
I'm a
Don't
little.
worry. The Trump is not just planning to screw America. He's trying to screw the world as well. Because as something happens domestically, there's a similar move internationally, abroad, international relations. We have this lunatic conspiracy theorist that just was confirmed as the head of healthcare in the United States, but Trump also doesn't want the world to stay behind when it comes to the new innovations of healthcare and decided to also lead the World Health Organization to match.
That I did not hear. Wait a minute. He's doing what with who?
Leaving
What with
it.
who? Wait a minute. Hold on.
Yeah, the United
Wait,
States.
oh
is
yes,
going
that
to
I know
leave
he's
who?
leaving it.
And with it,
Yeah.
with funding, give or take.
This very nearly turned into an Abbott and Costello routine. But yes, yes, that I know. He's leaving it. He's pulling the funding because apparently bubonic plague and medieval lifestyle appeal to him.
Yeah. And of course, U.S. aid. I actually, when I went from Poland to Ukraine and back, I saw pretty nice public toilets that people can go when waiting at the border, and it had this little neat sign, built by through the help of U.S. aid. But I guess that's gone now.
Yeah,
over.
well, and we've USAID is going to need its own show because that's a catastrophe on so many levels. Not the least of which is the people who are in.
That's a discussion for hours. Just how many
Yeah.
things Trump is trying to screw up. Like one of the nicest things that the U.S. has, in my opinion, the whole birthright nationality. He's trying to screw up. I mean, I know why he's trying to do it, but it's just one of the worst ideas to try to uproot that. The being born and being a citizen because being born in the United States.
And there's actually very few countries that that actually do that. Very few. And
that's why it's a very cool thing. That makes it even nicer that just a few countries do it.
He's taking the few good things America does, and he's destroying them, and he's taking all the bad things we do and going like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So before we get back to Ukraine, I do want to mention one other thing, just because we sort of almost touched on it, which is today, I think it was today, Musk tweeted out, "Down with Radio Free Europe." What is that?
It's connected to Ukraine, in my opinion.
Actually, that's a fair point. So what is it?
Like, well, it is, well, should I say was at this point?
I don't think it's done yet, but he is in flagrant violation of the law.
There's one other media thing, America something that was also pulled alongside with Radio Free Europe, wasn't it?
Not Air America. What was the other one? Well, he's going to pull whatever he can. NPR gets only a percentage of its budget, but it's a healthy percentage.
Is a pretty good radio. I recommend.
It is. They get, I want to say, only 30% of their budget from the federal government. So if the federal government pulls it, it's a big deal, but it doesn't take them down.
That's good. More people should donate to them.
Yep.
But yeah, let's not even talk about the second one.
Okay. So what is Radio Free Europe? Why? Well, most Americans, I think, haven't heard of it.
Polish people, it was this. During the communist quote-unquote times, there was no real... One of the biggest strangles that have been put on Polish people, and for many people that was the main reason to oppose the government. The lack of free information, the lack of uncensored books, the lack of uncensored news, like not being able to speak your mind freely, not being able to know what's going on in the world. And Radio Free Europe for many people was a source of actual information of what's going on in the world, right? It was free information, not inhibited, not censored, not, trained.
Okay, so free, accurate information. I can
Yeah.
already tell why Trump does not like it. All right.
Definitely compared
Before
to
we,
the communist sort of, you know. I
yeah,
say
yeah,
marks because there's a whole discussion on whether or not the Bolshevik style of communism in any way represented the actual idea, but that's a discussion for another day, I guess.
that's one. And while we're here, so we've dropped a link to Lucy's channel. Sunday, we've had on a few times. You all know Sunday. You know Brooks. But these are the kinds of discussions you will often hear them having, and Lucy is often there. These are the when they talk about Marxism, communism, political science, philosophy. It is extraordinarily interesting and I think important stuff. We here do sort of current events, so we don't get as deep into it. We used to. I have a BA in philosophy, but
I do more
definitely
history
worth.
than philosophy, personally.
But definitely worth checking out Lucy's channel for that. And when Lucy's on Sundays, it's always a delight. So, is Andrew, any thoughts on anything we've discussed so far before we get back to Ukraine? Or do you have a question on Ukraine you wanted to ask or anything like that?
My kind of curiosity is what's the perception of what's going on in the US overseas?
That's a
In
good
Poland?
question.
Yeah, what is on your end, what is your media saying? What is the general population thinking about the things that are going on in the US?
Well, it depends on the political spectrum, of course. There are people that are gonna be super far right. They're gonna cheer like little penguins. They're gonna clap and say it's cool, it's good. Unfortunately, some of the ideas that happen in the United States will inevitably be adopted in other countries. Fortunately, Poland has switched gears. Before 2024, it was ruled by the party called Law and Justice. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Polish party Law and Justice. Are you?
I'm
I
not. No.
yeah,
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
it was this pretty far right party that openly, as the only country in Europe in 2020, basically endorsed Trump. They said openly that in the national news, which was controlled by the party at the time, the idea was floated around that, hey, it feels like a really legitimate theory that it seems very. It feels like it's actually really legitimate to say that this election might have actually been tampered with or even stolen, And then that party, thank God, went away. A more centrist right party got into power with some left-leaning parties in the coalition. And on that side, the perception is that it's just craziness, that it's just either bluffing or insanity. I think the current Polish prime minister says that it's like the whole tariff thing against Europe might just be political bluffing to do some negotiation and arrive at something reasonable, but otherwise it's just nonsensical and baffling what's happening to people on this side of the globe. Like, especially the abandonment of Ukraine, since Poland is a pretty strong ally of Ukraine, especially since the historical relations between these countries have been successfully stabilized.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, it's kind of baffling and confusing to some of us too, and we're here.
Yeah, it's just like let's look at the thing that I've said before, like USAID, right? Apart from the fact that it throws away a lot of important humanitarian programs and a lot of people will probably die because of the lack of USAID. And a lot of people will find themselves out of a job because it funded a lot of NGOs. Even from a pragmatic US perspective, it's just flashing the soft power of the United States down the toilet for no reason at all, right?
It certainly seems that way.
Yeah, I have no clue why do it. Like saving, I mean, you would think that you would not want to save money on soft power, right? It's the thing that gives you grounding in the world stage, right? It's the thing that allows you to counter things like countries like Russia or China for that matter. And recently I've read that there was this department that was to monitor and counter foreign influence in the US, and that was gutted as well. People were just sent on leave that work for that department, which to me it sounds insane, considering how aggressively Russia has been meddling in the affairs of other countries, including the United States. And then you take people that are supposed to um, intercept it and counter it, and you basically fire them all, right? That's a lot.
Yeah, I think
You're very quiet.
that would explain why. I am, I guess, unique on the right. It seems that I'm sitting here saying, no, we need to stop this. This is not good, and
Mm,
I don't agree with what's going on. And even I'm like, okay, I can, at least in theory, get behind some of the ideas, what you want to do. But there is a thing called due process. So there is a procedure for all these things.
yeah.
Stop shredding the Constitution. I can't support this. So
Yeah,
it's been a huge issue,
I mean,
and
there's a whole discussion happening about the people that are on the right, the alt-right Republicans, and the emergence of the more radical "Make America Great Again" type of crowd that sort of that they don't really see eye to eye in many things, you know?
and then it just it makes me wonder because there a lot of stuff's been said about Ukraine. I personally believe that we gave Ukraine some assurances, and we should be standing up to those
Yeah,
things
exactly.
and fulfilling those things. And so it just kind of makes me wonder, with Poland being right there on the border, it just kind of makes me wonder what's going through kind of the
I
general
mean,
population of Poland's view. What's going on? What are
there's
we
a lot
doing?
of like Polish people. Let's remember when the invasion started, Polish people freaked out. Polish people panicked, started emptying their accounts because a lot of Polish people thought they would be next very fast, you know? And there's a lot of, I guess, fear about the United States just abandoning Ukraine because, like, Poland's government tries to stand strong and say there can be no negotiations without the Ukraine, and it also tries to arm itself. But Poland is also limited in what it can do. As far as I know, and in my opinion, at this point, Poland should be shooting down missiles and drones at least over the western side of Ukraine, but it doesn't because apparently NATO did not give it an okay to do it because that would be escalation, which to me sounds like a ridiculous proposition. From the beginning of this war, I feel like the West, the whole of the West, not even just the United States, the entirety of the so-called collective West, has been giving Russia escalation dominance for absolutely no reason. It's been just given carte blanche to escalate, 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 and the West has never really given a proper response. And the aid that has been given to Ukraine has been mismanaged from the very beginning. Too little, too late, always after the type of equipment is critically needed, only after Russia has learned how to adapt to it in quantities that are too little to make any difference, and that has been on repeat. And now we are where we are, and there are some voices that look at the situation and say, well, we've spent so much, and I guess this is just unrealistic. No matter what we do, this just cannot be won, right? And I say, yeah, it could have been won if the aid was not as grossly mismanaged as it was from the very beginning.
Well, hopefully we'll get a little bit clearer idea of what's actually going to happen,
Yeah.
because I don't think anybody over here even knows what's going to
And
happen. And
I don't, not to even mention the whole rare earth business thing that is happening. Like it basically says, oh, you want us to respect and actually abide by the Budapest Memorandum, the thing that we promised we'd keep the integrity of your borders if you get rid of your nuclear arsenal. Well, I'm afraid you're going to have to pay for us to do that now. right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, by the way, we want to do this quite a long time ago, but now we don't have much of a use for you, and yeah, so
Yeah,
pay
and
us to do any of this stuff.
there's also the fact that God, I wanted to say something. It's sort of out of my mind. But oh yes, a lot of these rare earth, like Trump titles himself as the deal person, right? The art of the deal, yeah, deal maker, yeah. He sort of positions himself as I don't really care about Ukraine, I don't really care about Russia. Whoever can give me a better deal wins, basically, and that means that since who who is to stop Russia from taking the same rare earths that it has under its control on Ukraine occupied territories, and there's a lot of that on the occupied territories, and saying, hey, you know what? What Ukraine's giving you, we can just match. What now? Treat us better. Treat us better than Ukraine. We'll give you rare earths. We've also got them. There you go. Let's make a deal. And what then? What if Trump accepts?
Yeah, I think that some of the previous actions of our government have soured a great many of people about being involved in overseas conflicts, and there hasn't been a particularly uh, concise overview of why exactly Ukraine matters and why we should be involved. It's like we actually have some sort of legitimacy to be helping Ukraine, whereas in many of the other areas we've gotten involved in, there really isn't.
Yeah,
And
but also
with some of the
the
things that have come to light,
like I think the biggest thing that makes the difference with Ukraine is that Ukraine itself asked for that help, right?
yes,
Like
and
in those other
it's
conflicts, there was no party that was like, yes, please, United States, come here and help us. And the irony of this whole thing is that the United States on Ukraine, I think, to date, still has only spent a fraction of what it spent on past conflicts. So,
apparently it's not as profitable to help people who actually want to be helped and
yeah,
who we gave some assurances to about territorial integrity and
yeah.
having a signatory to that agreement blatantly violate it, and we're just like meh.
Yeah, basically, and it is very. I mean, on the one hand, I want to say that it's disappointing, but on the other hand, it's basically a thing that has its precedent in history. Eastern Europe being traded away for the sake of peace and stability of the world, right? Technically speaking, Poland was among the victors of World War II, right? Polish soldiers fought with the Allies alongside them, and Polish was sort of treated as one of the countries that won, right? But what happened after World War II? Oh yeah, we're just gonna give away Poland to the Soviet sphere to be taken over and controlled. Here you go. Well done. Good job.
Is there a sense in Poland if, say, the United States decides, look, we're just not going to support this anymore, we're not giving Ukraine any more money or any
I
more
mean, I would
weapons to
like to
fight
believe
this
that
war?
I'd like to believe that Poland would just keep supporting Ukraine no matter what. That is what I'd like to believe. Like it is a bit embarrassing that I believe Poland has given more tanks to Ukraine than all the other allies have.
So if you could make the case, at least from a bordering country, not it's obvious why Ukraine would want help, but being a neighboring country, can you make the case for why the United States should remain involved or perhaps even get more involved?
I mean, there are three separate ways of talking about this. There's the very pragmatic argument of Europe being um, the biggest trade partner of the United States, which, by the way, Trump doesn't seem to care because he just wants to tariff it now. So his trading sense seems to be, I don't know, I don't even know what to make of the fact that he wants to do trade wars with some of its biggest allies. But putting that aside, Europe is extremely important for the United States when it comes to trade. Europe is an important partner when it comes to the United States, even when dealing with countries like China, right? Because Europe, as a united body, not its individual parts, not its individual nation states, has a lot of power that it can use to support the United States in its dealings with China and regarding, for example, Taiwan, right? And I think that if the European Union could present a united front, it very well could present a proposition to Donald Trump. If you want us to help you, you must help us now. And you help us now by helping Ukraine, because Ukraine is a very important part of Europe. If Ukraine falls or is destabilized, that automatically affects Europe. It destabilizes Europe. It threatens the security of Europe. And that threatens those good US European relations. That would be the very pragmatic argument, right? So it is in the United States' interest to support Europe by helping Ukraine. That was the whole point of the United States' involvement in Europe, to stop the USSR from overrunning it, right? The same types of arguments apply here. Then, of course, you have the argument from me as a Polish person that there are special certain ties when it comes to Poland and Ukraine. So, of course, there's going to be this favorable view of Ukraine. And supposedly Poland is a big ally to the United States, so some
All
politicians
right.
state that. And finally, the moral argument that it's just a morally good thing to do, regardless if Ukraine has anything to offer or not.
Yeah, that argument's going to work on Trump. Well, and presumably that was part of why we
Well, I
created
assume
NATO.
that
The whole
was
point of NATO was
yes,
to,
yes.
yeah.
But I sort of assumed that that was a question directed not just at Trump, but also at the American general. Yeah.
Yes, and you assumed correctly, and I'm glad that you used it. I don't pass up a chance to take a shot at Trump. If there's a chance for me to take a shot at Trump, count on me doing it.
I argument as when I form my opinion on this. Like I don't really think we should care if Ukraine has anything to offer when it comes to resources or value, etc. It's just there's a whole group of people that are suffering, and we should stop it from happening. And I think that it's not just in Ukraine, in other parts of the world as well. I don't think just because something is happening far away, we should just turn away and ignore it. We wouldn't want our houses to be burned down. We wouldn't want our families to be murdered. Why would we allow it to happen to other people?
And the world's gotten big enough small enough now. The internet has made it small enough that everybody's a neighbor in one way or another. Let me quickly do this. I want to do a super chat that I did. My unfinished journey, $2.22. Hail Nero, Nick and Lucy, and down with the marmalade Mussolini. Thank you very much, My Unfinished Journey, for that super chat. We enjoy being able to bring this kind of content to you, and not to sound too much like NPR, but it really is the donations that make it possible. We work very hard to bring you good content, and today I think we've done a great job on multiple episodes, and so it really does help. Thank you very much for your support. So at this point, it looks like Trump wants to negotiate solely with Putin. It looks like he is very rapidly reestablishing his bromance with Putin. Do you think that Trump is interested in leaving? So I'm going to approach this from the other side first, and then get back. But do you think that Trump is interested in leaving the Ukraine, whether it's because he's doing Putin a deal? Whoa, I can't believe I just said that. Yeah. Let me rephrase that. Yeah, do you think he's interested in leaving NATO? Do you think he's interested in leaving NATO and or seeing the dissolution of NATO, if at all possible?
I'm not so sure if he wants to leave it, or I think he will try to pressure it to spend more and more and more. I think he will he'll try to get as much mileage out of it. Although, seeing as I think he might not leave it because if he feels like the United States are not, quote unquote, funding it. So if the country starts spending a lot on it, individual countries, then he probably might be inclined to be like, okay, I'll stay, even though it sucks.
The EU has talked about militarizing, and the EU is an economic deal. It is not a self-defense pact Yeah, so they've talked about now adding an army. Is there a lot of support for that? And is there any There's what?
There's a lot of backlash, actually. There's been a lot of backlash for a long time because, unfortunately, the European Union is made up of individual nation states with individual interests, which I'm not a huge enthusiast when it comes to the concept of the nation state to begin with, but it creates problems such as if we make a unified European army, then we're basically undermining the sovereignty of our individual countries. That limits our freedom, etc., which in itself is a pretty silly argument because the point of creating international structures, international law, which we could get into the whole thing how Trump actually uh, wants to do away with any sort of international law de facto. And the whole point of establishing these international rules is to a degree at least, undermine such a thing as national sovereignty. The biggest example that I like to give is the Genocide Convention by Raphael Lemkin. The whole idea of establishing that convention was to limit the sovereignty of individual nation states. Because do you know what the norm was before World War II and even a little bit after World War II when it comes to things like genocide? What became genocide? You know what
My
the norm
understand
Yeah.
my understanding is that it was basically sort of just don't ask, don't tell regarding
No,
genocide.
it was worse. It was
Oh,
whatever the state decides to do with its citizens is a matter of its sovereignty. It can do whatever it wants to its
ah,
citizens. It can kill them. There were survivors of the Armenian genocide, and they escaped. And the perpetrators, there was this famous incident when one of the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide went to a place and one of the survivors killed him, and he was tried for it. And Raphael Lemkin asked his friend, who was a lawyer as well, why is it that the perpetrator of the genocide was never tried, never persecuted, prosecuted, nothing happened to him, but the victim that killed him was? And the explanation that was given to him, and it's, I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically that, is that an owner of a chicken coop has all the chicken in his coop and he can kill them, he can do whatever he wants with the chicken. And if some outsider tries to interfere and stop the owner from killing the chicken, then he's just interfering with the owner's property, the chicken. And that's basically how the citizens of a state were treated, as the property of the state, because it had the sovereignty to do whatever it wanted to them. And that is exactly why in the Nuremberg trials, nobody, no German or no Nazi was tried for killing German Jewish people, because that was considered the sovereign affair of Nazi Germany. So nobody in those trials was actually tried for killing uh, German Jewish people.
the U.S. refused to join the World Court. In so doing, the U.S. essentially gave carte blanche for anyone who doesn't want to join. A number of countries, nonetheless, have said it is the right thing to do, and we are doing it. Trump has now.
Yeah, International Criminal Court.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
Yep. Sorry if I wasn't clear. Now, Trump has decided to, quote, sanction that court, which really means sanction any members of that court that are investigating the U.S. for failing to call what Hamas is doing genocide, and for calling what Israel is doing genocide.
And also for issuing the arrest warrant for Netanyahu.
Yes. Can the ICC continue to operate, and is it effective if the U.S. refuses to participate in any way and or hold its own people, Kissinger, on accountable for what they've done?
No, I think it cannot. I think what the United States is doing is a blatant spit on the idea of international law. International law cannot be just used and applied selectively. Either everybody abides by it or nobody abides by it. And it just gives carte blanche to other countries such as China and Russia to say the United States doesn't care about international rules. Why would it? In fact, the vice minister of foreign affairs in Russia said, look, we've outweighted Biden, who wanted this liberal law based order in the world. Now we have this guy who's basically our man. we can do this nice bipolar world order when might makes right, and it's all good now. We don't have to care about this liberal law order, and that is what it is. What it is. Trump doesn't care about international law, and if a big country, the most powerful country, doesn't care about international law, then the whole idea becomes um, worthless in practice, which is a shame because I believe that we should move towards a world in which there wouldn't be these polars that would just bully the smaller countries and be considered the only important players in the world. There should be international rules that everybody should have to abide by, and there should not be a situation in which a president of the United States says in an official argument, in an official document, you cannot prosecute any of our friends, any of the countries that are our allies. You cannot do anything to anyone we like because we actually like it really is becoming like the Star Wars I love democracy. We actually really like the international rules based order, but you know what? You just cannot do it to any of us or any of our friends, or else we will just sanction you. And this is ridiculous. Like,
I heard earlier, yeah.
yeah, it is. The answer is that it cannot function.
I heard earlier today that the U.S. actually only supplies about 30% of the aid that effectively gets to Ukraine. I'm not sure if that number is accurate or not. I think
I'm
it
not
was
sure of
a,
that either. I think it's bigger. I believe it has to be bigger, at least when it comes to military aid, because you have to separate military aid from humanitarian aid, of course.
so what happens if Trump decides that the path of least resistance in this case is to say, well, I'm going to do the presidential thing, the right thing, and actually stay out of it. This is just a European matter, knowing full well that that's actually siding with Russia. Well, staying out of it is siding with Russia. So he says, I'm going to stay out of it and just allow Putin to continue, and I'm going to pull out all aid. At that point, is the EU capable of supporting Ukraine? How long? We do know that Ukraine, in sort of the middle to northern middle areas, if you go back, I think about 10 kilometers, they hit the permanent fortifications that have been put that are likely to stop Russia there, but Russia will continue to hold what they've already gotten. What happens after that, if that happens, in your opinion?
Well, I think Ukraine would be in really big trouble. There are a few reasons for that. To begin with, the manufacturing capability of Europe is still not up to task, and there is a big disjoint between individual nation states. Once again, the same problem that does not allow Europe to build a unified army does not actually allow Europe to build a unified manufacturing system, because as Ukraine has learned in a painful way, there are instances in which Ukraine receives a one model of artillery system, right? And
Yep.
all countries abide to the same NATO standard of shell, right? Of the
Yes.
and technically speaking, they should all work with that system, but they don't, because in each individual nation state there's a little bit of a tweak, there's a little bit of a personal touch on those shells, and they end up not being, compatible between themselves. So that's already a big problem that has to be overcome, that you need to do a unified streamlined system in which all the countries would produce the same thing, that could be interchangeable, that everybody would be able to operate in the same way, that you'd not have to train everybody in 10 different systems and how to use them, how they work. You'd not have 10 different types of munition that only work with this or that. You need to have it streamlined, and Europe does not have that. And Europe also does not have an army to supply Ukraine if need be, because there is this talk of a peacekeeping force should the war. That's a whole different topic. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But Ukraine would be in big trouble. I don't think when it comes to the military, Europe would be able to just pick up where the United States would leave and just supply all the aid that it needs. And I think everybody knows it, especially since even now, when the U.S. is still, for the time being, aiding Ukraine, a lot of the time, for ridiculous reasons, and that applies to all countries of Europe, even including Poland, European countries will say, yeah, we'd love to give you those anti-air systems. Yeah, we'd love to give you these things, those things. But you know what? We sort of want them to for our own defense, which at this point is a ridiculous argument because what is Russia going to missile this or that country in the middle of a war with Ukraine? Do those countries need those anti-air systems so badly that they cannot spare even one or two to Ukraine? It's ridiculous. It's this is another uh, part of this puzzle that needs to be discussed. And there's also the fact that European Union is not even united really on the topic of Ukraine. There are countries that are in the European Union that are openly pro-Russia, Slovakia, um, we have Hungary. We have Romania that's still a little bit in trouble when it comes to its, the whole situation with the presidential election. We have like with other countries. We have like Georgia that's just also with the Dream Party moving towards Russia. So we also have these sort of problems, right? Like Georgia was supposed to move towards the European Union, but then it just went full steam ahead towards Russia.
Vladimir Putin has repeatedly bemoaned the collapse of the Soviet Union and has been suggesting that he's going to try to get all of the former Soviet satellite states back.
Yeah.
How much of the EU is concerned that this is a move against all of those states, and that that this isn't basically early Nazi Germany, where he's like, well, I'm only going to take a third of Czechoslovakia. No, I'm going to take half of Czech. No, I'm going to take all of Czechoslovakia, and that you can't permit this. How many people are afraid that that's where we are, and how many do you think are saying it's really not our concern?
Well, there's again, there's also, even considering this, there's the fact that Germany is one big question mark right now. Like, what if the Alternative für Deutschland wins in Germany, right? The party that openly states that um, Eastern Germany is actually Central Germany, which we all know what that implies, right? And like, I joke, but I wonder what if the wins, right, controls the country, and in time we end up with a special military operation in Poland because Eastern Germany is Central Germany, and
Yeah.
uh, we like, it depends on which part of Europe you're talking about. Western Europe will be less worried about the satellite states because the West has already given up on Eastern Europe before historically so that it can have peace and quiet. And there already is a little bit of a push to segregate the European Union into tier 1, which is Western Europe, and tier 2, which is the eastern regions of the European Union, but that is a whole topic in itself. And I guess the closer the countries will be to Russia, they will be keenly aware of how Russia operates and keenly worried about the situation. The more west you go, the more it will be like, it's far away. So what if Poland becomes a satellite of Russia? It was before, and it was no big deal, There's
Yeah, no big deal except to the people who had to live under it.
Yeah, but that's not really a concern of people that are far away and aren't really affected. That's unfortunately a lot of the time the reality of the situation. That is the sentiment behind the slogan "Not our war," right? Which is present
Yeah.
wherever a country just doesn't want to get involved. People say, don't, and it's also a very nasty side effect of the existence of the nation state, in my opinion. The idea of the only people that we have to care about are the people of our nation, those who were born within these borders. They are the only people that we have to give any consideration. All other people are either lesser, or in the case of people that want to come here under certain conditions, are even less than almost non-human entities. like refugees or asylum seekers, for example.
Well, it sounds like we need the hostile aliens to show up so that humanity can finally actually unite together and realize, hey, we're actually way more similar than we are different, and maybe we should live like it.
Yeah, like
Okay, so Lucy is Star Wars and you are Star Trek. Got it.
yeah.
Sorry, I thought that was funny. Okay, never mind. Um, so
I'm more Independence Day.
you're independent. Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and unites all of. Okay, there you go. There you go. I'm not for that scenario. I'm saying I'm not for it, but I guess if it frees Ukraine, no, even if it frees Ukraine,
Like
I'm not for
it's also
the
like
alien invasion. But
like also people don't realize just and that includes Western Europe and even the United States to some degree. People don't really realize just and for like Western countries hate immigration, etc. Do people not realize just how much of an immigration like refugee crisis Ukraine falling would create? Like, do people not think about these topics at all when they consider what to do in a given country? Even given Putin what he has and he demands more, given the territories that he wants, would create a massive refugee crisis in Europe and maybe even in the United States. And what then?
well, and he's already acknowledged in the Budapest Accords that Ukraine was a sovereign country. So there's no real way to go and sit there, go back and say what he's saying now, which is,
But
oh no, it's always been our,
yeah,
and it's always going to stay that way.
recently as the justification for the whole rare earth thing, right? Why he wants the rare earth thing, he said, we don't know what will happen, which is an indication of the level of support that the US is willing to commit to the stability of Ukraine because he said we do not know what the future holds. Maybe Ukraine will be Russian one day, maybe it won't.
Yeah.
We don't really know, and that's why if we don't get our due payment now, we will feel like idiots when Ukraine becomes Russian.
So I can think of two remaining questions I want to ask. The first is there are we like to think of things in terms of black and white, and one thing caused another, and it's rarely true. There were a lot of things that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union, but
Yeah.
arguably one of them was the U.S. deliberately trying to outproduce Russia and deliberately trying to get them entrapped in Afghanistan. So the U.S. was constantly the Star Wars program, which ostensibly was never actually supposed to work. It was just supposed to scare Russia into creating more and more and more until they collapsed their own economy. But part of what did it was this entrenchment in Afghanistan. There has been an argument made, especially on the right, that essentially this is what Joe Biden was trying to do here. He never actually wanted to help Ukrainians. He never wanted to Ukraine to win. This argument has been made in part by Ben Hodges, though he did not opine on the how or why. But for a minute, let's take a look at the argument that maybe what Biden was doing was saying, if we can damage the Russian economy enough, we can have it collapse just like the Soviet Union did. So he did exactly what you said earlier was the central problem. He would provide them the weapons, but just what they needed just a little too late. And it was always enough that they wouldn't lose, but never enough that they would win. Is there any evidence in your view for that argument? Do you think it's possible that Biden was just, he really didn't want to help? He just
Well,
wanted to hurt
if
Russia.
if that was the plan, then it was executed horribly. Because if that was the intention, then what should have happened is that actually Ukraine should have received a lot more aid, so that Russia would be forced to commit more and more and more because they would see that they're not doing the progress that they want, that they're not good. Like right now, by the end of the Biden administration, Russia has been losing a lot of people, but Russia does not care about losing people, but still been making steady, gains in territory, right? Ukraine had to retreat in many places because there was not
Yep.
enough equipment, not enough aid to equip everybody to for adequate. There are many even creators that are journalists that go to the front line and they create video productions that you can watch on YouTube that explain this phenomena really well. And there's if the it really if the intention was to weaken Russia's economy, it should have been aid that would create a ironclad defense for Ukraine that Russia would just smash against time and time and time again. That would exhaust their stocks at a much higher rate. It would not be this crawling forward that Ukraine has to retreat, right?
Yeah.
Because at this, like, Ukraine suffers losses as well, and it lost a lot of its experienced people. It's not really working that way. Like, if the intent was for Russian economy to, like, the way it worked is that Russia basically outlasted Ukraine if the worst case scenario will come to pass. So the exact opposite of what supposedly Biden wanted would come to pass.
So, uh, because the Budapest Accords were such a catastrophic failure for Ukraine, I mean, it couldn't have gone worse.
Yeah.
Zelensky has repeatedly stated that there has to be something more this time. There isn't going to be a lasting peace without something more, and we all know, wink and a nudge, what that is. It's entrance into NATO. Is NATO really willing to take Ukraine? Will all the countries, they need a unanimous vote, including Turkey, who likes to hold out just to get something more? What do you think is the likelihood of that possibility? Will NATO step up? What are your thoughts?
No, it won't. No, it won't. All countries will not agree. Countries are too, again, the same escalation dominance problem that we've been talking about before. NATO is just scared of the possible nuclear Armageddon that is looming on the horizon. And we will thus just very consistently, the United States and Germany have been opposed to Ukraine joining NATO, which again, Zelensky himself has asked a really good question. We are not in NATO, so why is Russia here? You say we cannot join NATO. This war supposedly is about NATO. We're not in NATO. We're not gonna be in NATO. Why are they still here? Why won't they just retreat? We should get our borders back then, because the main reason for the war is now complete nonsense. And the problem is that NATO is a tangible guarantee of security. We know that by the example of Poland, although some said that there's a probability that if Russia attacked Poland, then the West would decide that Poland is just not worth defending, and losing Poland is not really a big deal, even if it is a part of NATO. But that's neither here nor there. But the problem is that there's nothing. There's not a security guarantee that is given to Ukraine. Ukraine has nothing right now. Ukraine has requested Europe because, as part of the peace, part of the whole system that is supposedly to be put in place, there is to be a peacekeeping force. And again, the United States says we will not commit any troops to such a peacekeeping force. So that's again taking away another security guarantee that the US could potentially give. Would be, we will put our troops on the ground, we will build bases throughout Ukraine, because that's a deterrent that the United States uses very effectively around the world, right? You put a base, you put even a small number of soldiers in that base, and what? Will a country just dare to attack US soldiers? No, it won't, because that would mean trouble. So it could be a thing that the United States could very well do in Ukraine, sprinkle bases near the border. We are manning these with US soldiers, not even a huge amount, because Russia would not just dare attack US soldiers. And that's it. But the United States, or rather Trump, I believe, has said clearly, we're not going to do that. We're not committing any United States troops. So then Zelensky said, okay, why? Well, then we would we would request for the European Union to provide us with 200,000 soldiers, right, as a peacekeeping force, all from all around the European Union. And the response is, no, we cannot provide. And this is the response to how much could the European Union help should the United States pull out. We cannot give you 200,000 soldiers. We will struggle to give you 30 or 40. We will struggle to put together such a peacekeeping force of 30 or 40,000 people. So that is completely useless should Russia attack again. And Russia already said that we will not allow any peacekeeping force to be in Ukraine because we will just attack them because they will be legitimate military targets. So there's no alternative to NATO, and Ukraine is basically left with nothing. Ukraine is left just bare assed to be attacked in the future. That is the reality of the situation as it shapes up right now. There's nothing that Ukraine has tangibly, and that is another thing, another problem that Ukraine has. It is at the de facto mercy of its so called allies when it comes to negotiation both with them and with Russia. Like, what sort of bargaining power does Zelensky to say to Putin, maybe we could work out a better deal? Maybe it shouldn't be 500 billion in rare earths. Like, the United States has certainly not provided 500 billion worth of aid. Like, and a lot of the aid, which is a thing that people do not understand, a lot of the a lot of the money from that big aid figure from the United States goes to the US manufacturing of weapons to replenish the stock after the old weapons that are given to Ukraine, right? So it's not like Ukraine has received some huge amount of money. Now Ukraine has received the old equipment and the money goes back to the industry to replenish. And
Well,
yeah,
not just the that, but Ukraine has been very generous in, and this has been kind of the wink and the nod of them getting the stuff. They've been very generous in giving us reports on how well our weapons work in real life. So we
yes,
have been actually expanding our own technical knowledge of the
yeah,
use and weaknesses of our weapons because Ukraine has been reporting on that to us as we give them the weapons.
yeah, exactly. So it's basically it's a ridiculous it's a ridiculous thing to say you have to give us now 500 billion in rare earths. Like, if Ukraine received actual aid worth 500 billion dollars, we would have been in a completely different place now. It would have been a completely different reality right now on the ground.
Well, Lucy, you've given us a tremendous amount of information, and I really thank you for that. Before we go, is there anything that you feel we missed that you wanted to talk about or that you think is important on this topic? I know we've touched on a lot of stuff, the Budapest Accords, what Trump is doing, what's been offered, that phone conversation. Anything you feel we missed or anything that you wanted to
I
talk
mean, you
about
do breaking
before we
news,
head out?
right?
Yes, we do.
So we could discuss briefly the new peace talks in Ukraine will include both Zelensky and Putin, Pentagon chief says.
Oh, that is breaking. That's a dramatic change from 3 hours ago. But that's my new catchphrase. Is that's a dramatic change from 3 hours ago because that's basically all the. I mean, Zelensky and the EU have both said that they would not accept a deal that did not include Zelensky in the forming of that deal. So it's odd that should have to be said, but that had to be said. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it says here, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Is that how I'm supposed to pronounce it?
Yeah,
Hegseth?
that's it. Yes. Hegseth, that's yes.
Okay, has said that peace talks on Ukraine will involve both Ukrainian and Russian presidents. Of course, to me personally, it doesn't mean much because you can have both parties, but one party might not be allowed to speak as much. It might be overshadowed, talked over, silenced. It's just the presence of a party does not follow that they will all be treated as equal partners. That is a thing that is worth remembering in these sort of conversations. After the
Well,
EU,
and the other thing that's worth yes,
yep.
please.
Yeah, no, finish. I was just about.
The other thing that's worth considering is that, in my view, and people like to say Trump lies a lot, or everything Trump says is a lie. That really isn't true. There's a difference between lying and unreliability.
Yeah.
Trump and Hegseth are both completely unreliable. If he says something, it's a coin flip as to whether it's true or not. There's no way to know. They don't distinguish. So it's not that Hegseth is a liar. He's unreliable. I have no idea if it's true or not. There's no metric for truth out of any of these people.
There are certain things that Trump does not lie on, right? Like, he said he wanted to waste billions of gallons of water in California. He went and did it. He bragged about it proudly. So he certainly did not lie about that, right? He
Well, and he's made deals, and I it's weird, but I give him credit on one thing. It feels weird, it feels odd, but it's sort of like in Trump's mind, this is how it works. He said the thing that we mocked the most was him saying that he was going to build a wall and get Mexico to pay for it. Ostensibly, that's one of the promises he's actually delivered on. And the reason is because Mexico, in order to avoid the tariffs, has committed to putting, I forget how many, like a huge amount of national defense soldiers on the wall to keep their own people in. So you've got a wall of soldiers that Mexico's putting on it. Now that's assuming Mexico keeps their promise. And the other thing I'm learning is Trump breaks all his deals. He had a deal with Canada saying, but no tariffs. A week later, tariffs on the steel and I forget what else, maybe aluminum. So he broke his own deal in a week. But the reality is he doesn't check to see if the other side is actually following through on their. So he will have forgotten about Mexico. So Mexico could literally send troops to the border. The troops get there. There's a note pinned to the wall. They get the note. It says, "Come on home, guys." They're like, "Oh, okay." They turn around and come home, and Trump is going to have no idea. He's not. And they could send the troops. The troops could stay there, permanent encampment, and he may say, "Oh, they never sent troops," when they did. The reality has nothing to do with what Trump wants, does, or accomplishes.
Yeah, but also the problem is that all the things that he does, all the institution that he attacked, just does not understand how any of them work. I think that's the biggest problem
Yeah.
of his presidency. He does not understand what he's doing. Like the big example that I keep returning to is the gutting and possibly trying to in the future completely eliminate the Department of Education in the United States. And the problem is that many people that just don't understand what the department can and cannot do. Okay, so I guess I'll ask you, what does the Department of Education do in the United States?
I am not an expert, but it does provide for school lunches. It provides meals for underserved communities. Most schools in the United States are paid for by income tax. So you have areas where if you grow up in the United States in a very rich community, you are going to have schools that are filled with technology, filled with the best teachers, with the best pay, because the taxes can support it. The problem is, if you live in a poorer community, you are not able to get that level of quality. So I was going to say Board of Education, the Department of Education helps give additional funding to those schools. They also do set some base minimum standards. The Common Core was one of them, where they said everybody has to learn this basic minimum level of, and it's, sorry, it's property taxes. Thank you, as Andrew just corrected me. So it's property taxes, not income tax. Yeah.
It's a completely ridiculous system.
Yes, it is. So, so that's it. So they do set a base minimum of standards. The Common Core was the attempt to take a whole bunch of just a spaghetti of standards that they had and combine them into this is at a minimum what every school needs to teach, and then you can add to it. You just cannot subtract from it. That is the Department of Education, to the best of my understanding.
Yeah. But what was that last thing that you said?
Things like the Common Core, where they said we have a set of standards that we are going to enforce. States can teach above that standard, but they cannot teach below it.
No, they don't do it. They have the Department of Education has nothing to do with curriculum whatsoever.
I think the Common Core came out of the DOE, but I could be wrong. Let me look that up.
Like the curriculum, at least that is what the Wikipedia says.
I just want to see who created the Common Core, because my understanding was
I know that the Department of Education, at least according again to the wiki, can give recommendations as to what can be improved in education, but it cannot set any sort of curriculum to any. Like the education is basically in the hands of the individual states. They set the curriculums. They set what is being taught, etc., which to me is also a pretty bad system because it means that there's no standard education across the board. Like one state can say we're gonna teach creationism, one state can say we're gonna have this or that, and in my mind, the Department of Education's competency should be expanded rather than shrunk. But then we have Trump going officially in the Oval Office and say, you know what? Our education is so low level. If only we could take the education to the states, give it to the states, then our education would be on the level of all those states like Norway. It would be great. We have such great red states that would just be super happy to take care of the curriculum, and then the education level would skyrocket, which the education is already in the hands of the states, okay? And we are where we are. So, like, trying to gut an institution is one thing, but trying to gut an institution without basic understanding of what it does and saying, oh, if we only had what we already do, things would be great, then I, I don't know what to say at that point. The only thing that Trump will accomplish is to deprive poor people of grants to get education, make America great again by depriving kids of education and lunches, I guess.
Well, and I think this goes in line with the meritocracy, as what's his name, Musk put it. I think he thinks that basically, if you're part of whatever the meritocracy by whatever metric you use, then you should be entitled to the better schools, and you shouldn't be wasting money on poor kids who can't learn. I think that's the thinking. By the way, I did want to just say this. I stand corrected, and you were correct. The Common Core was adopted by 47 states, but it was adopted at the state level, and the Department of Education had nothing to do with it. So thank you for that correction. And I can let go of some of my ire. I was a teacher too, so you'd think I'd have known that, but I had always thought the Common Core had come from the DOE, and so thank you for that. I've learned something today. So
As I understand it, the Department of Education in the United States works in a completely different way than in other countries. It does not have
well,
as
the
much overarching power over what's happening in, yeah.
yeah. All right. Any other final thoughts before we go?
I don't know. I maybe there are some questions towards me, if there are any.
If anyone has any last minute questions before we go, while we give the chat a chance to think about that, Zandring, any final thoughts?
Other than opining on the U.S. system of how things were set up, which is a little bit of field of what's going on in Ukraine, I do find it interesting to explain, especially to Europeans, kind of how the United States was founded, or what the idea behind it was. It's much like, say, the entire European Union. Each of our states, they're called states, with the exception of two, which are commonwealths, because they were kind of viewed as their own countries, and then the U.S. government was put together. They came together, they united, I guess you could say, to form a federal government to help manage the large landmass. But at the time, especially around the founding of the country, you were a resident of your state first. The United States was a distant second. So it was kind of set up in that each state would be its own little microcosm of democracy. That was the idea behind it. So I liken it to the European Union, where you have all of the different countries, also states, and then you have the EU itself, which kind of governs issues between states. So you have that kind of overarching one, but each state's allowed to kind of set its own policies, its own laws, with some restrictions. There were certain powers granted to the federal government that were supposed to be limited and enumerated. And over the years, of course, we've expanded, we've changed a lot of different things. So some of the things have changed, but education has always kind of been viewed more as a local, not even so much on a state level, but more of like a school district level. And there's been attempts to try and unify that together, and to varying success. I mean, some people are happy, some people are not. There's a growing trend of people saying, get your kids out of public school and homeschool them. So yeah, it's getting to be a bit of a mess, and I do think that there is at least an argument to be made that, hey, the education of our children affects the country's future,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't want a single state to be setting the standards of education for everything. So I think there is an argument to be made that the standards for education ought to be set by the federal government.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And it would be up to the individual. Like, I actually do think that there should be the standard that should be like the thing that was proposed here, that there should be a standard that the states should meet. Like, there's at least basic standards of the earth is not 6,000 years old or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like basic.
Which we have.
Yeah.
We have too many of those in the U.S. That's still, at least we're down below 50%. But in my lifetime, still there was a 50% of people thought the Earth was only 6,000 years old. All right, I'm gonna give this observation from Titan, because I think it's a very good observation, and then I think I'm gonna wrap it up. Titan observed that it's a form of gerrymandering. And they divide funds. So they divide funding according to district, not by equality. They don't give the funding equally, and I think that's an interesting observation. Where basically what you can do is districts that have either undesirable people or voters that you don't want to vote for the other guy, you make sure that those districts are incapable of competing, and it's had, unfortunately, a great deal of success. Lucy, tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you.
Yes, Lucy Haze. I am the biggest Polish Jewish trans streamer, and I do history. I do politics. I travel to Ukraine quite often to do interviews with, I guess, refugees, but I've mostly been concentrating on a organization that helps to rescue kidnapped children out of occupied territories as well as out of Russia. So I've recently interviewed a 15-year-old that has been taking out the occupied territory in Kherson. And I also do sometimes languages, and I also play games on stream. So that's like a mixture of things.
Well, it has been a very informative show, Lucy. Thank you very much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we can count on having you back, because I don't think this is the last time we're going to have these kinds of questions, unfortunately. And so tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, we are going to have both Viper and Operator Starsky on. We're also going to have Commander McMillan and a Xandering, and we're going to be talking various military issues, and also...
Did you just say 3 p.m. Eastern?
3 p.m. Eastern, yes, I did.
Okay.
For the first show, yeah, so you and I were talking, and then there is at 8 p.m. Eastern, another show on meritocracy, how it's defined by Elon Musk. Is meritocracy and DEI, are they mutually exclusive? What's the goal of DEI? What's the goal of meritocracy? And what can we expect? Christopher Mowdy has a great deal of information that he would like to share and have a panel discussion on. We will be having Ethan ProLib on. Hopefully, Xandering will be able to make it. I will be there, and I think Mowdy is also reaching out to Nate the lawyer to have him come on and give his views on that. So 2 shows planned for tomorrow, and then on Tuesday, Mercado Media, Merck, and Dylan Burns will be on, hopefully also with Greg Terry, so that we can discuss it. That was the one reporting from the front lines, independent journalism, how that works, and what it's like to go through and witness these things.
You can ask him about the shortages, about what people told him, etc.
That is an excellent idea, because they all have access to direct access to Ukraine. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, My Unfinished Journey, for your super chat, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, to have Viper and Starsky on. Have a good night all, and thank you again, Lucy.
Okay. How do I leave?